Hello, hello, hello. I am your host OCL, and welcome back to One Century Later. Today we'll be taking a look at all events from August 30th to September 15th, 1925. As with last week, all of my sources are in the description down below. Sunday, August 30th, 1925. The Italian Ministry of Aeronautics was formed to regulate the Italian Air Force and Italian civil aviation. It was created as an equal to the Ministry of War and the Ministry of the Navy. Benito Mussolini, the Prime Minister of Italy, appointed himself as the first head of the newly formed ministry. In 1947, the Ministries of Aeronautics, War, and the Navy would be merged together to create the Ministry of Defense. Also on this day, votes were cast in a constitutional referendum in Chile to determine the new Chilean constitution. Voters were given the option between a constitution written by a subcommission and supported by the President of Chile, Arturo Alessandri, and another constitution written by the Congress of Chile. The constitution written by the subcommission won 127,509 of the 135,783 votes, or 94.8% of the votes. Monday, August 31st, 1925. Ajdir, the capital of the Republic of the Rif, was bombarded by French and Spanish planes and warships during the Rif War in Morocco. Also on this day, U.S. Navy Commander John Rogers and his crew of 9 others attempted to be the first people to fly non-stop from San Francisco, California to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a distance of 2,400 miles, over twice the distance that any previous Navy plane had flown in one trip. John Rogers would command one of the PN-9 flying boats, PN-9 number 1, while Lieutenant Alan Snowdy would be commanding the other, PN-9 number 3. Throughout the flight, the seaplanes would be making periodic contact with U.S. Navy ships to ensure that they were on the right path and for quick recovery should anything happen. 5 hours into the flight, and shortly after passing the first naval ship on the way to Hawaii, the destroyer USS William Jones, the second seaplane, piloted by Lieutenant Snoddy, began experiencing engine malfunctions and was forced to land in the ocean. Tuesday, September 1st, 1925. Nicaraguan President Carlos Solorzano declared martial law throughout Nicaragua, as it was unknown that the rebels in the fortress of La Loma would vacate it after agreeing to release their hostages. Also on this day, the Central Bank of Mexico, Banco de Mexico, was inaugurated after being authorized on August 25th. The bank had the exclusive power to regulate exchange rates, interest rates, and mint coins and banknotes. And finally, after being forced to ditch the plane in the water the previous day, Lieutenant Snowdy and his crew would be picked up by the USS William Jones and towed back to San Francisco. All hope for completing the nonstop flight to Hawaii now rested with PN-9 number 1. However, the seaplane commanded by Commander Rogers was having similar luck. By 8 a.m. Hawaii Aleutian time, the plane was about 700 miles from its final destination, but they were rapidly running out of fuel. Commander Rogers made the decision to ditch the plane near the mine layer USS Aroostook to have the plane refueled before continuing to Hawaii. This decision would end the chances of a non-stop flight, but the crew would still be able to make it to Hawaii. The Aroostook sent their coordinates to the seaplane for refueling. However, when the seaplane arrived at those coordinates, the mine layer was nowhere to be found. They had been sent the wrong coordinates. 25 hours into the flight, they ran out of fuel and safely ditched the plane in the water. The plane was 400 miles from its destination, but had set a new distance record for seaplanes at 2,155 miles in one trip. Unfortunately, while the plane's radio receiver was powered by battery, the radio sender was powered by a wind generator which only worked while the plane was in the air. The crew was able to hear but was unable to respond. With the loss in radio communications, a rescue search was launched with the 3 closest ships, the USS Farragut, Aroostook, and Tanager, arriving at the presumed location first. Commander Rogers and his crew were able to listen to the communications from the rescue ships, but were unable to provide assistance as to where they were. Wednesday, September 2nd, 1925. In an effort to increase the separation between church and state, during his social reforms, Turkish President Mustafa Ataturk issued a decree prohibiting politically affiliated religious lodges from operating within Turkey. Also on this day, the Central Bank of Albania, the Banka Kobetar e Shqipërisë, was inaugurated after being authorized on June 22nd. On the second day of being stranded 400 miles off of the Hawaiian shore, the five-man crew of PN number 1 quickly ran out of their food rations. Their water was in very short supply. There was a fresh water still on board, however they lacked the fuel for making it work. At 8 a.m., the crew spotted a commercial steamer on the horizon, so they shot flares. But the steamer did not see them, and they quickly lost sight of it. Radio man Otis Stantz started using engine parts to build a rudimentary radio sender, but was not having much luck. The rest of the crew used parts of the wing canvas to create a makeshift sail to sail the plane the rest of the way to Hawaii, using the plane's tail as a rudder. Thursday, September 3rd, 1925. French Army General Philippe Pétain replaced Hubert Lyautey as the commander-in-chief of French forces in Morocco in an effort to bring an end to the Rif War. Also on this day, the U.S. Navy dirigible USS Shenandoah, which had been launched the previous day on a flight from New Jersey to Ohio, reached a pocket of extreme turbulence caused by storms. The intense vibrations and effects caused by the turbulence and air currents were too much for the frame of the dirigible to handle, and it started to break up while in flight. Of the 43-person crew, 14 of them would die when the dirigible crashed. On the third day of being stranded at sea, the crew of PN9 number 1 was running low on water rations, and they had picked up new companions. Sharks. Using the makeshift sail, the PN9 was slowly making its way to Hawaii, having traveled 50 miles at about 2 knots per hour. During the day, the crew spotted the USS Pelican, but much like the commercial steamer the previous day, it didn't see them, and they quickly lost sight of it. From their receiving radio, they learned that the search and rescue ships were heading in the opposite direction from their location. Radio man Stantz was able to send a message from his makeshift radio that was picked up by a nearby ship. The message was so garbled, no one knew it came from the stranded crew. Friday, September 4th, 1925. With the newly acquired territory of Svalbard in Norway, the Norwegian government appointed Johannes Bassøe as the first governor of Svalbard. During the Rif War, the Rif rebels launched an offensive against the Spanish-held city of Tetuan. Saturday, September 5th, 1925. 12 Druze rebels in the French Mandate of Syria were executed by firing squad near the city of Aleppo. Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King of Canada dissolved the 14th Parliament of Canada. The 14th Parliament was in session from March 8, 1922 until September 5, 1925. New elections for the Canadian Parliament would be held on October 29th. Following the crash of the USS Shenandoah 2 days prior and the missing PN9 crew lost at sea, U.S. Army Colonel Billy Mitchell issued a public statement saying, "These accidents are the direct result of incompetency, criminal negligence, and almost treasonable administration by the War and Navy departments." These statements would lead to U.S. President Calvin Coolidge ordering his court-martial. And finally, the aircraft carrier USS Langley arrived in Hawaii and began sending planes out to assist in the search and rescue of the downed PN9 crew, whose freshwater supply had just run out. That is all. See you next week for all events from Sunday, September 6th, 1925 to Saturday, September 12th, 1925.